Thanks for joining us. I recognize some of you from HEDW in Atlanta. I really liked that event. That was my second time going. I went last year. WhereScape has been sponsoring it for 6 or 7 years. But I like it much more for a couple of reasons. One is it's a fairly small event. I think there were 310 registrants this year, so you get to see people multiple times and recognize them and call them by name, and that's much nicer. I'm going to a show in San Mateo in California in June where they have over 7,000 attendees, and there's no way you can build up any kind of rapport or have good stories or make any kind of connection at that kind of meeting. The other thing I like about it is it's educational. WhereScape works with higher ed, elementary, independent school districts, as well as manufacturing, NGOs, nonprofits, finance, banking, pretty much anything you can imagine. And the HEDW show I like because it's very collaborative. The people who are there are more than willing to share everything they're doing because they see everyone else there as a compatriot, not a competitor. The commercial shows are quite a bit different, and people brag about the good things they're doing, but they don't tell you about the things that didn't work usually. So in HEDW, we get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, as they say. I did do a 50-minute presentation, I think, on Tuesday when we were there. I talked more than doing demo, and I got a couple requests to do a longer demo, which is what today is for. Feel free to share this. You're going to get a recording of it. If you have any questions afterwards, I'll stick my email address in the chat. You should have it, but in case you don't, there is my email address. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to talk with you. You're probably going to also get emails from our account executives, maybe Ricky, who was also in Atlanta, maybe one of our other account execs. What else can I say up front? Let me just explain a little bit about WhereScape in case you missed it. WhereScape started as we're a software company. We started as a consulting company, I think 25 years ago in New Zealand, building data warehouses. And I'll just say at the beginning, data warehouse has a very specific meaning and a very general meaning. And I use it in the general sense of a historic archive of curated data from one or more sources that's used for analytics. And now it's used for AI as well. So it could be a data lake, could be a data lakehouse, data mart, data fabric, data mesh. There's some other ones out there as well. But it's just a large foundation for an analytic system. So we started building those by hand in New Zealand and realized we were doing a lot of repetitive tasks. So we started building tools to automate those tasks, and those tools became quite powerful, quite flexible. And people started asking if they could buy those tools. And at that point, WhereScape stopped as a software company, stopped as a consulting company, and began as a software company. So today I want to show off those tools. We have two of them. The diagram I have in front, and I'm assuming you can see my screen, is what we call RED. It was the first tool we built, and it's a builder tool in that it creates individual objects. The other tool I'll show a little later is our design tool. The builder tool, RED, is more of a bottom-up approach. I'm going to create individual objects. I'm going to assemble those objects into my data warehouse, and then we'll run it from there. The design tool is more of a top-down approach. I can create a conceptual model of what I want to build. I can then create a logical model, adding attributes to that, and then I can discover and profile my source systems, attach my source system to that. All that's done independently of wherever it is you're building your data warehouse. The last thing you do in the design tool is you push it out to the builder tool, which is what we have here. And that's when you tell it, hey, this is for Snowflake, this is for Databricks, this is for on-prem SQL Server, this is Oracle, whatever it is. And the builder tool will create the SQL code, the DDL, the DML, the Python code, whatever else is needed to create the objects and then to create the pipelines that move data through the data warehouse. This diagram we use all the time. If you stop by our table, we have little cards with this diagram on it, and I probably held one up and talked to you about it. But over here on the far left, we've got data sources. That's where we're pulling data from. Those could be ERPs, could be Banner, Workday, could be databases, on-prem SQL Server, Oracle databases, Postgres, wherever that is. Could be REST APIs, could be JSON files, Excel spreadsheets, pretty much any place you're pulling data from. And then over here on the far right, we've got BI and analytics tools. So that's people using Tableau, Power BI, Looker. If you're feeding data into an AI engine, I would throw that over here as well. So what WhereScape done, we're a software company. We have tools that help you design and build and run everything in between. So everything happening from the loading stage all the way to the accessing stage is all taking place in what we call a target. That's where you're building your data warehouse. So again, that could be Snowflake, SQL Server, Oracle, Redshift, Google BigQuery. There's about Postgres. There's about 18 different targets we support. We're not like an ETL tool. We don't manipulate the data directly. Instead, we are more like an ELT tool in that we will extract data from a source, immediately load it into, for the demo today, it's all taking place in Snowflake. And then everything after that is Snowflake's doing all the work. So WhereScape isn't downloading data. We're not manipulating data. We're just getting data loaded into the target and then issuing SQL commands that create these objects and then move data through this pipeline. If you're familiar with Databricks and their medallion architecture, I would call this the bronze layer, this the silver layer, and this the gold layer. So typically we're going to load data unchanged, one-to-one copy of whatever's in our source system. We may add some initial stage tables to do a little bit of manipulation. All the transforms are done in stage tables. There may or may not be a data foundation, depending on how much data you have. In Data Vault, this would be a raw vault. It could be third normal form, could be a data store, whatever data you need to store before you create what would be called your presentation layer, your semantic layer, your gold layer, the stuff that's going to be used by the end users outside of the scope of WhereScape. So if you're an analyst or if you're working with analysts, you typically won't be using WhereScape. You'll typically just be benefiting the results of it. But we do have some people. I can't remember Mary's last name, but she's at Bates College up in Maine, and I bring her up all the time because she's a one-person shop. She's an analyst, and she's using WhereScape to build everything. So she's not a very technical person. She probably knows SQL, but certainly doesn't know Python. Certainly doesn't know how to do typecasting to change SQL Server data types to Snowflake data types. Probably doesn't know how to issue HTTP commands to do REST APIs. But WhereScape is doing all those things for her. So as an analyst, just by herself, she's a one-person team, she can decide what she wants to build and then use WhereScape to really accelerate building that. Jeff Christian, who was the president, I think he was president of HEDW the last 2 years at Cornell, they've got a team of 6 or 8 people who are using WhereScape as architects. And there's enough automation built into it that he can bring in undergrad students and graduate students and have them do a lot of the work. Then he can run his scripts and check and make sure standards are being followed, naming conventions are being followed, and things really work the way they should work. So it's an accelerating tool in a couple ways. One is that I can generate things much faster, and not just generate things. It's not that I can generate a 1,000-line long Python script. I can generate a 1,000-line long Python script that works the first time, and I can generate 50 of them if I have 50 different load tables that all work the same way, and they'll all work the same way. That's one reason you get really great performance improvements, productivity improvements out of using WhereScape. The other is that besides things working, there's a lot of technical details that WhereScape is filling in that you don't need to know. I mentioned typecasting and things like that. So what I'm going to do in today's demo is I'm going to start in our builder tool just to show you what it is we are creating. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a load table from my SQL Server data source. I've got SQL Server running on my laptop. And again, everything I'm going to be building today is in this whole layer here is all in Snowflake. So I'm going to create a load table. I'm going to dump data out of SQL Server and load it into Snowflake. I'm going to add a stage table, and I'm going to skip over this whole middle part and just create a dimension. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't force any particular architecture. Um, you can pretty much make up anything you want. The way I described red is I say it's like building individual Legos, and then you decide what you want to build with those Legos, how you want to assemble them. And then I'll generate some documentation. That's pretty good. I'll show you what that looks like when I'm done. I'll talk about the scheduler. Any questions or comments before I get started? You can type something in the chat. You can type in the QA. If you want, you can just unmute yourself. Otherwise, I'll just keep marching forward. All right. I'm either on mute or I'm doing a great job of explaining things. So, load table. I'm going to create a load table in Snowflake from my SQL Server data source, and I'm going to move data from SQL Server into Snowflake. And again, this target could be about anything. This is the builder tool. Probably about 50–60% of my customers just have the builder tool. They don't have the design tool. They're both very good. They're both very helpful. Hopefully you'll be able to see value from both of them. But I've got various connections here to S3 buckets, to my sample database that's running on my laptop, to a REST API. I just use the Treasury Department just to pull back random. Thank you, Carrie. I'm just using the Treasury Department to pull back a JSON file through our REST API. There could be JSON files on Windows, on Linux, all these things. As I said, there's a variety of sources, places we can pull data from. I'm going to happen to be pulling data from the Northwind database. I can browse this, and using the ODBC connection, we query the catalog tables in SQL Server, and I can see all the tables that are on here. I can see columns. I can actually even go and I believe look at some rows and see what's in my source system. Again, this could be a JSON file as well. I'll show you that a little later. So how do I get this out of SQL Server and get this into Snowflake? Again, that's my first step. Double click here, set my context here to load tables. And I've already got some created. You can see that one's coming from an S3 bucket. These are coming from my Northwind database, but I want to add customers. So I just drag this over and drop it. And there's already a couple standards that are being followed. If you notice, this is all uppercase, whereas my source system, it's mixed case. Some database systems differentiate between upper and lower case. Some, like SQL Server, depending on what character set you're using, can distinguish between upper and lower case. So I'm just in the habit of just always making everything uppercase. I've configured my system so that all the load tables go in a specific schema, all the stage tables go in a specific schema, and everything else goes into this HEDW schema. And then WhereScape automatically understands, hey, we're going to Snowflake. We're coming from SQL Server. So any data type changes, things like that, will be handled automatically. So I'll say, okay, we're going to add this table. That all looks good. I've got a few options here. The important things I want to point out is there's a template. This is the template that's going to be used to generate a Python script. The Python script is what's going to do the work of going to SQL Server, getting data, and putting it up in Snowflake. And there's a lot of scripts here. I actually have a set that generate Python scripts. I also have a set that generate PowerShell scripts. So you've got a choice. Do you want to run Python or PowerShell? I just by default pick Python. And I'll say, okay, we're going to build our Python script that's going to do all the mechanical work. That's done. The next thing is, do I want to create the table? Because this table doesn't exist up in Snowflake yet. So I'll say, sure. I'll create the table, and then I will run that Python script we just created, and it'll migrate the data from SQL Server up into Snowflake. It takes a few seconds, and there, it's done. One of the things I want to point out also is that we're wide open. Everything we're doing, here's the DDL that creates this table. I can also, go here and look at the DDL and see what it was. The script that's running is outputting what it's doing. I always say we're whatever the opposite of a black box is. Everything we're doing is wide open. The templates are wide open. The metadata that we're capturing as you're doing all this is stored in a Postgres database. All that's wide open. It's a very open configurable tool, which is pretty cool. one of the things we've done, because we know Snowflake, because we know SQL Server, I mean, we've grabbed these, what are called extended attributes in SQL Server. They're basically, they can be a bunch of things, but one of the things they can be is comments on a column. So we've gone ahead and grabbed that. And this will actually flow all the way into the documentation I'm going to create later. But now I've got this table up in Snowflake. If I display data, there's the data. That's up in Snowflake now. That wasn't there before. So the table's brand new, all the data is brand new, and it's essentially a one-to-one copy of what I have in SQL Server. Let me just show you that these are the various columns I've added. They pretty much match what's on here. The varchar 50s are all stayed as varchar 50s. The nchar 5 changed to a char 5. That's because WhereScape understands how to convert SQL Server data types to Snowflake. We can pretty much convert anything to anything. And that leads me to talk about some of the flexibility you have with this tool. SQL Server supports user-defined data types. And in one of the sample, I think it's called AdventureWorks, one of the sample Microsoft databases, they take advantage of that. They've got a variable type called person. Obviously, WhereScape is not going to know what that user-defined data type is or what it means in Snowflake. But you can go here. You can say, okay, let's look at the data type mappings. We're going to Snowflake from SQL Server. Here's all of our data type mappings. I can just add one and say, okay, we have a data type called person, and there's our new data type called person, and we're going to convert it to, I don't know, varchar 200, whatever it is. So I've got the ability here, if I don't like the way the typecasting and conversions are working, I can add my own custom ones. I can change the ones that are there. Like I said, there's a lot of flexibility here in what we do. The script that creates this table, the script that, if I look here, this is the Python script we generated that runs. This was just generated. I'm in the central time zone. So this was generated just a few minutes ago, 4 minutes ago. It is 622 lines of Python code. It's got a lot of error checking. It's got a lot of outputting status and things like that in case you're in a debug mode. And what it essentially does is runs a select statement that pulls data from SQL Server, does any data type changes it needs to do. In this case, it doesn't. Copies it up into Snowflake storage, and then loads it into the table. I don't know Python. I've used WhereScape to generate tens, if not hundreds of thousands of lines of Python code. And the nice thing is it works. So I'm done. I've got my load table. I've got my data up in Snowflake. We have gone here, and we've already done that first step of getting data out of SQL Server and getting into Snowflake. I'll pause again for any questions. Next thing I'll do is I'll create a stage table and a dimension.
Even connecting to the Oracle, it's going to be the same thing, or any database. I saw that you are taking example of SQL Server, but if we are loading data from Oracle to the Snowflake, more or less the WhereScape will work. I'm thinking maybe similar way, but I want to ask.
So I need an ODBC connection, which I've got on my machine. And once I've got that, I can just go here and say, okay, I'm going to create a connection.
Connect to any database. Okay.
I'm going to create one, and it is a connection. I'll call it Oracle.
Okay. Yeah, understood. Yeah, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to ask. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a database connection connecting to an Oracle database. I may need some more credentials in here.
Of course.
But it's that simple. And then
so what we are seeing now on the screen is what the WhereScape builder is, right? This is what your product that you're showing, right? What is this? The
I'm
builder that what is on the screen, the builder
yes.
is WhereScape. Okay.
This is called Red. Yeah. And it's the builder tool. It's what creates the physical model. So it's going to create objects that are specific for Oracle or SQL Server or Snowflake or whatever it is. The second tool I'm going to show you, you work at a conceptual and logical level, and you don't care where it's going to be built. It isn't until you export from there and import into here that it actually creates the physical model.
Okay, great, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so going back to this, I'm going to create a stage table. I'm going to skip over this whole middle part, like I said, and just create a dimension. So how do I do that? I browse my data warehouse now instead of my source system, because everything's in the data warehouse now. Here is my new load table. I don't have a load customers table yet, but just like before, set my context to stage tables, drag this and drop it. Again, the naming conventions and target destinations and things, building everything from a template. I'll go ahead and create and load the stage table. I haven't added any transforms yet. I'll do that in a little bit. I don't have to, but I'll tell it what the business key is. That's going to help a little bit downstream. I'll just say okay. And it's not terribly exciting because I haven't added any transforms or anything, but here's my stage table. If I look here, I've got the table exists up in Snowflake and all my data is here now. Stage tables can do several things. Maybe I've got multiple sources where I'm pulling customers from. Maybe I've got an ERP I'm pulling customer information from. I've got a customer resource management tool I'm pulling customer information from, and I want to load them all into the same dimension. I can merge data in a stage table. I can add transforms. I can denormalize. This is an example of this stage table is pulling data from a parent table, load orders, and a child table called load order details. So I can join data and denormalize it. I can merge it in case I've got, like I said, data coming from multiple sources. Basically anything, all the data prep, all the data quality checks and everything else are going to take place within the stage tables. And the last thing I do in this demo is, or for the creating objects, is I'll create a dimension. I've got my stage table. I don't have a dim customers yet, but I'll add I'll say the dimensions being created from the stage table. And now it's asking me what kind of dimension do you want to create. This is type 1, where I've got one record per business key. Type 2, where I've got a date range for when values are active. Current value and previous value, I think, is type 3. And this, I think, is a type 7. I've never created one, but it's there. And again, if there's some other thing you need to do, you can modify the templates. We have, with around 1,500 customers around the world, probably about 6,000 to 7,000 users around the world, we have a whole vast, what we call field solutions folder. So if you do need something specific, you need a template modified, we have a customer success team that's for every customer, and you can contact them and say, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. Do you have something? Maybe there's something in the product. They can tell you how to use that. If not, they can look through the field solutions and maybe come up with something that's close. And they could probably spend a few hours helping you build out whatever customizations and templates you need. All right, so I'm going to create a type 2 dimension for customers. I've got some options here. I can, what is the purpose of this? This is online customers. What's the grain? This is one customer per row. And then for an example, I'll just type in some garbage. And just like before, I'll build my update script. And I'll create and load my table. Now, building the update script, it knows the business key because that came from the stage table. The other thing, since this is a type 2, I need to tell it what columns I want to track changes on. A slowly changing dimension, a type 2 dimension, and I'll just say company name and contact title. If those change, we want to insert new records with a new timestamp while retaining the old value. So I can go back at any point in time and see what the company name, contact title is for any particular point in time. Right, so here is my dimension. I've got my ghost record. Again, all this was just created, built up in Snowflake. I've got my artificial key, my circuit key for my dimension. And then if I scroll over, I've got my metadata columns for each column, since this is a type 2 column, telling me when were these values active. So everything since I just loaded is beginning of time, end of time. Everything's got a current flag set of 1, and everything's got a version set of 2. But suppose you're looking at this and you're looking at the data, and maybe you're, like I said, maybe you're merging data from multiple source systems, and you one company name's all caps and another one it's not. Maybe these null values are messing you up. Maybe you want to, I don't know, you've got a field that's last name space first name, and you want to break that up into multiple fields, whatever. You want to add calculated columns. All those transforms are taking place in the stage tables. So I'll add a transform to company name. This is mixed case right now, and I'll change that so it's uppercase. I go back to the stage table. I look at the columns and go, okay, company name, I want to add a transform. What transform can I add? I can add anything that's a valid SQL expression. So here's what's going to be put into the company name column on the stage table. I happen to know that there is a post, and again, this is Snowflake function called upper, and I can paste in my source system name. Now, this is a real simple example of automation. If you notice, I haven't typed anything yet, except for the comments I typed in from the dimension. I haven't typed anything. I've clicked, and it's filled everything in itself. The idea being that the less typing I do, the fewer mistakes I make. The fewer mistakes I make, the faster we can get to a working production documented system. All right, I added my transform. So what I need to do is I need to update my update procedure. Need to refresh it. I'll just click OK, and the update procedure gets rebuilt. I will run my update procedure. I'm doing everything interactively right now. What I'll show you in a minute is the scheduler we have that can run these automatically, but I'm doing everything interactively right now. And if I look at the data, I can see that company name's now all uppercase. I mentioned we can look at the script that runs this. This gets data into the stage table from the load table, or from other stage tables, or from multiple tables. It's basically an insert into, select from. Insert into the stage table, select from all the appropriate tables. There may be, in the case, it's only selecting from one table, but there might be others. Here's our transform. That's why I said it can be any valid SQL expression. I can type anything there. It could be a subquery, could be a case statement. I can reference other objects in the database. I happen to use just this embedded Snowflake function called upper, but that could, like I said, could be an if statement, if nulls, case statements, subqueries, anything that's a valid SQL expression I could put in as a transform. I can add calculated columns, and this could be, column 1 plus column 2. The nice thing is, as I said, this all works. So let's look at the type 2 dimension. I changed my data in my stage table. First of all, I added a transform to the company name. I recreated my update procedure. I reran my update procedure. It looked at the same load customers table it was looking at before, but it applied the upper function to company name. So my source data has changed. That's going to go into the dimension. So if I just update this, I haven't changed anything in the dimension. I've only changed the data being fed into it. Now, when I look at this and look at the data in my dimension, I can see that every customer has 2 rows. And the reason it has 2 rows is this is a slowly changing dimension. So this was the original row we loaded the first time. If I scroll over here, I can look and see that the effective date range for that row changed. It used to be what I would call beginning of time and end of time. The current flag used to be yes, but the code, the SQL code that's running, that's updating this dimension, says, okay, we have a new value for company name. Let's change the end date on the old record to the current time. Let's set the yes flag to no, deprecate it from Y to N, and we'll insert the second row, and its effective start date will be the current time, and end date will be the end of time, and it is the current flag, and it's got version 2. So right there, in a matter of a few minutes, I have created a working type 2 dimension. I had a coworker who, before he joined WhereScape, was tasked with building a data warehouse. And they decided that they were going to use slowly changing dimensions. And he said it took him about 3 or 4 weeks just to figure out how to implement it. How are you going to do it? And if you're building stuff by hand, and let's say you build 10 slowly changing dimensions, and all of a sudden you decide you want to change how they work, you got to go back and rebuild by hand 10 different objects. If I decide I want to change the way this works, and I've got that dim employee and dim product, and I want them all to work the same, I can take this template, WSL Snowflake PY script hist, I can copy it and modify that, and so that it will generate whatever Python script I want. Then I can simply regenerate the code for my dimensions and everything's working. So as my requirements change, as new things come online, maybe there's new features of type 2 dimensions. I don't think they've changed in 15, 20 years, but if they did, or if you decide there's some logging information you want to put in, or let's say, well, let's say on every record you want to add a source system. By default, Kimball modeling doesn't include the source system as an attribute. But let's say you want to do that. What do? Well, the first thing I would do is contact customer success and say, hey, I want to start tracking my source system. I'm loading data from system A and system B into the customer's table or the student table or the classroom table, whatever it is. And I want to include my source system name. I'm sure they can find someone who's done that already, and they can send you templates and things that would do that. All you do then is you modify the templates that create these tables, recreate them, modify the template that generates the load scripts and update scripts, regenerate those, and you're done. Now, obviously, there's work involved. If you've got historical data you want to keep and other things, and you probably want to test it and QA it. But the idea is if that requirement did come down, we want to have the source system name on every single row in our facts and dimensions. And let's say I've got 100 objects in my data warehouse. It might take me a week to do that, to do it and make sure it works, test it, document it. But that's pretty good for a pretty major change like that. I would probably spend more time testing it and making sure it worked than I did actually implementing it. Okay, so Johns Hopkins, which I don't think is the real name, but asked a couple questions. How is it licensed? How's code promoted between environments? How are objects versioned? Is Git supported? Okay, let me tackle those in that order. How's WhereScape licensed? WhereScape is licensed by developers. So I'm using Red. I am a developer. We haven't seen it yet, but if I move to our design tool and I start using this, I am a user. So we're licensed by users. Technically, users and targets. I'm only generating code for Snowflake. So I have a license to act as a developer to generate end product, the data warehouse in Snowflake. We don't care about number of environments. We don't care about number of objects. We don't care about amount of data. We don't care how many analysts you have looking at the data. It's strictly number of developers. There's no consumption costs. It's one straightforward annual subscription for the builder tool and a smaller, I don't know, maybe 10% more for the design tool on top of that. How's code promoted between environments? So what I have here in this area called all objects is I've got a down here where it says redx meta snowflake. That is my ODBC connection to my metadata database, this metadata repository. And that is a Postgres instance. Every environment you create, a dev, QA, pre-prod, prod, whatever it is, your 50 million sandboxes, whatever you want to do, each of those is simply a separate Postgres database. And then when I start Red, there it goes. I tell it which metadata repository I want. I've got one here for Google BigQuery. I've got one for SQL Server. I've got one for Postgres. I've got one for Snowflake. So I have on my machine right now, I don't know, 4 or 5 different metadata repositories. I might have one for Snowflake Dev, Snowflake QA, Snowflake Pre-prod, Snowflake Prod. Like I say, each one is simply a separate Postgres database. How do I get data from, or data, not data, my work from dev to QA? I can create what's called a project. So this all objects shows everything in my metadata repository, all my connections, all my load tables, all my stage tables, facts, dimensions, everything else. You can create what's called a project, which is a subset of those. So I've got a small one here that has a couple things in it. And then when I'm here, I can say, okay, let's create a application. This essentially creates a XML file. I can then bring up my QA instance and say, okay, I want to import that application into my QA environment. There's a lot of, I don't want to say complexity, there's a lot of things that can happen. Tables may get added, which is fine. We'll just add the tables. Scripts may get added. Jobs may get added. Fine, we'll just add those. The little bit of complexity comes in. What happens if an object already exists and we've updated it? Very simply, if it's a load table or a stage table, by default, we drop it and recreate it because the load and stage tables are not historic. They're typically flush and fill. That's configurable. You can change that, but by default, most customers will, when they run the load table, they'll truncate it and reload it. When they run the stage table, they'll truncate it and reload it. So those by default are dropped and recreated. Obviously, the dimensions, facts, and things like that have historic data. Those are typically done with an alter statement, alter table. That's all configurable. It's all changeable. So you've got a lot of ability to modify that to meet your specific needs. I'm going to check the time real fast. Okay, I got about 20 minutes left. Question was, are objects versioned? Yes, I made a change to this object. I didn't add anything, but I did change my script. Basically, anytime I change an object by adding a transform, adding a calculated column, deleting something, we internally keep track of all the versions of that. If I look at my update procedure here and say, okay, let's look at another version of this, I can look here and say, okay, here's my previous version. I can then say, let's compare this to my previous version. And if I go here, I can see that the comment changed on when it was generated. This is the newer one. So this exists in this script. This line doesn't exist in the script, but exists in the previous one. And if I scroll down here and look at my transform I added, I can see where that line changed as well. So if you do make a mistake, you do need to restore an object, restore a script. That's all easy to do. If you really mess up and need to back up in production from a current version to a previous version, I can take my application I created, which is basically an XML file, and redeploy it. And the last question was, is Git supported? Yes, in two ways, a rather simple way and a more integrated way. The simple way we have is that people are doing two things. They're taking the scripts, which are being created, and manually putting those into Git. They're taking the XML file that we created when we created an application and putting that into Git. They're taking the DDL that you can generate and putting that into Git. Starting with a version that's going to be out, what is this, April? By the end of the quarter, so by the end of June, you'll be able to highlight objects. And I don't think I do have it set up. Yeah. So this does not work right now. But what I will be able to do eventually is to highlight individual objects and check those in and out of Git as well. That should be functional by end of June. All right, documentation. I'm going to start talking a little bit faster. We've got all the metadata here. Let me talk about the scheduler first. My scheduler is messed up. I broke it and I haven't been able to have the time to unbreak it. But if I look at my dimension and look at here and say, okay, what's the impact? Because we have the metadata, I can look. This is a very simple example. Dimension comes from stage, comes from load, comes from customers. Okay. If I look at the individual objects, customer ID, for example, and look at that, I can look at the individual objects and see where they came from. Company names the one I changed. I was wondering why the transform wasn't on there. Track back there. And maybe it came from multiple tables. Maybe there's calculations added, transforms added. I'd be able to see all that right away. As an analyst, this is great. I can go in. Question always comes up when you generate a new report or a new dashboard. Where did this data come from? Do you trust this data? I've got full data lineage. I can look and see exactly where things came from. The other thing is, in this tool, I can go here and say, okay, let's build a job that populates this dimension. Again, my scheduler is broken. I've got options here on how often do I want to run this? When do I want to run it? What degree of parallelism do I want? What commands do I want to run if this succeeds or if this fails, so I can report errors? And we already got that, so I'll just create another one. And it understands the sequence of how we need to do things. Again, this was pretty straightforward. Maybe there's multiple load tables. Maybe I've got facts and dimensions. WhereScape understands you need to populate the dimensions before you can populate the facts, because you're trying to join business keys in the fact to business keys in the dimension. So all that's taken care of for me, and I can now have this job that I can run and have it repopulate my dimension, repopulate my entire data warehouse. So that's what I can do with the scheduler. Again, I apologize, I'm speaking a little bit fast because I got a lot to show off. We haven't even seen the design tool yet. Documentation. We create documentation. I'll just accept all the defaults as an HTML file. So once we create this, I can take this HTML file and put it anywhere. Right now it's sitting on my laptop, so I've got access to it, but I can put this on any shared file system. I've got two types of documentation. One we call user documentation, which is meant for the end users, the analysts. It's got some nice things in it, like a full glossary, including things we just added. DIM customers, the business key for the customers. That probably shows up a few times. DIM customers. And this is what I meant about that comment. I never typed that in. That came from the SQL Server extended attribute, made its way into the load table, migrated to the stage table, migrated to the dimension, made its way into the documentation. And if I want to modify the documentation, maybe this is a quantity on a fact table, I can add units of measure or things like that. Maybe that I heard in Banner, there's people were talking about this other 15 field, which you can use for about anything. And one person I was talking to said, yeah, up until like the year 2018, we used it for one thing, and between 2018 and 2020, we used it for something else. And since 2020, we've been using it for a third thing. There's a couple things I can do. I could put that in the documentation, but also now that I think about it, I probably want to create a stage table and split that other 15 into 3 different fields, depending on when it was actually used. How to populate the fact table from the dimension table. What if the grain of the fact table changes? You need to add a new key to the fact table. Okay, I can talk about the first question first. I've got a fact table here. And if I wanted to add the customers to it, I've got my DIM customers here. My fact table is being populated from, if I look here, stage orders, as well as DIM employee and DIM product. If I go to my stage orders table, I can see that it is populated from the dimensions. I already have customers in there. Let me get rid of that so I can show you what I'm doing. Nope, I deleted the wrong thing. Oh, well, I didn't delete the wrong thing. It went away. But everything's coming from the load orders table, the load orders detail table, the DIM employee, and DIM product. So how would I add, I've got customer ID on here. How would I add the dimension? Very simple. WhereScape is smart enough that it understands what dimensions are. If I refresh my data warehouse, here is my new DIM customers. I just drag it and drop it. And it goes, okay, that's the dimension. WhereScape understands the business key on the dimension is customer ID. It said, hey, there's a corresponding customer ID here. So we'll assume that that's the way the join is done. If it's not, I can change it, but it's going to fill in the blanks for me and assume that customer ID on the stage table is the same business key, foreign key for the business key or primary key on the dimension. From here, I need to rebuild this table because I've added a column. I need to recreate my update procedure. I need to go to my fact table and add that column from my stage table. I need to rebuild my update procedure here. And then I can rerun the update procedure here and it'll all link together. I can regenerate the documentation, trackback diagrams, star schemas, everything else will all flow into place. All right, I would show you that, but I've only got about 13 minutes left and we haven't hit the design tool yet. I've talked about the documentation. Oh, I didn't finish talking about the documentation. The technical documentation, I prefer that because the user documentation is a subset of the technical documentation, but it's got the same glossary. It's got all the objects in here. Here's the dimension we just added. Here's the comments I typed in. We do have ways of adding these comments automatically. If you've got, say, CSVs or a data catalog, you've got Purview or Colibra or something else. Even if you got CSVs that have comments in them for the columns, we can automate pulling the comments out of files and adding them there. But it flows all the way to the documentation. Now, this didn't flow to the documentation. This is stuff I typed in. Excuse me. I've got my trackback diagram, and for my fact table, this may look a little strange because I've been playing around with this. I didn't actually add them customers yet, but it'll show you a star schema. It'll show you I did something weird with the fact table earlier where I did have the customers on there. So when I created the documentation, it's going, okay, we'll join that as well. But here's my star schema. If I go back to my dimension, I know all the transforms are done in the stage tables. So let's go look at the stage table. I can go here and quickly see that, oh, well, here's the transform I added to that. All right, I've got a few minutes, 10 minutes left. This is like a brief overview of what we're building and how we're building it. Again, the red tool, a lot of customers just have this tool. They've got a fairly small data warehouse they're building. They already know what it's going to look like. They already know what objects they want to report on and the attributes those objects have, what entities and attributes. They can probably draw out on paper what it's going to look like and then use this to build the load tables, build the stage tables, and then combine everything into facts and dimensions. I talked about the scheduler. I talked about the documentation. So let me jump into our design tool and show you how it works. So this is also a Windows application. This also has a Postgres backend. Unlike the red tool is building things. It's creating a physical model. It's creating the DDL to create objects in the target. It's creating Python scripts. It runs those Python scripts and loads data and migrates data. This design tool is purely a whiteboard. All it's doing is creating metadata. It's not creating any physical structures. It isn't until you're done with your conceptual models, your logical models, your data mappings that you push it out to red, and then red builds the physical model. So everything I'm doing in here is independent of wherever I'm building my database, my data warehouse. I'm building a conceptual model, and I'll just talk through these briefly. I've got a very kind of silly conceptual model here that just has, these are the objects. I didn't even get very far on this. I should have, a little more information here, but basically the conceptual model is what objects are you going to report on? What hierarchies and relationships, ontologies and taxonomies. What is a teacher? What is a class? What's the relationship between a teacher and a class, between a class and a student? Maybe you've got finance over here. Someone I was talking to in Atlanta, they're doing analytics on the cafeteria. Sure. You could probably do predictive analytics in the cafeteria to figure out what you need to order, how much you need to order. You probably have analytics on number of meals served and use that for analysis. But here it's kind of pie in the sky things. Maybe I'm using Irwin. Maybe I'm using RStudio. Maybe I've already got this model created, in which case I can import it. If I don't have it, I can pretty much just go here and say, okay, we're going to create a new entity. And then I can describe that. That's the conceptual model. The logical model is where I start adding attributes to that. So I've got a more filled out one here that has employees and orders, order details and products and customers. So these are entities. These are attributes. And I've already defined the data types for all my attributes. And in this case, I've already told the design tool where the information is coming from. So really, my customers table, if I look here, I can see these are all the individual attributes I have. And then here's where the data is coming from. Now this happens to look very clean because I did what you're not supposed to do. I modeled my data warehouse after a source system. That's not a good thing to do. You want to build your data warehouse model after your organization's needs. What do they need analytics on? That's how you want to design your conceptual and logical models. For the purposes for demos and things, I cheat and I say, okay, we're just going to make this look exactly like that Northwind database. In the real world, you don't want to do that. But here I've got my conceptual. Let's say I've got my conceptual model. I've got all the entities I want in here. I've got attributes and things like that. Maybe I've already got something. I can create this from an existing model through an ODBC connection. But then the next thing I do after I get my conceptual model created, after I got my logical model created, and I have about 7 minutes left, is I profile my source systems. Same thing with the source systems. I've got my Northwind database here. I can have S3 buckets. I can have JSON files and stuff. Down here, you can see these are called workflow buttons. These are typically the next things I want to do. Depending on what it is I'm looking at, those buttons can change. When I'm looking at a connection to a database or to a JSON file, I can pretty much just say discover connection. So let me click on here, and this will do two things. It will profile and it will discover, and I'll explain what those are in a minute. I need to give it a version number. I'll just give it today's date, 24th already. It is 24th already. I happen to know that in this database, I don't care about the views and system tables, and I happen to know that there is a table that's starting here. It starts with the word sys, which I'll ignore. So this is discovery. I'll do a full discovery. I'll explain what that is. And this is profiling. I'll do full profiling. I'll explain what that is. Basically, the discovery gives me the structure of my source system. So that's what this is. We've gone to SQL Server. We've queried the catalog tables, and we've got essentially an ERD that describes what the source system looks like. Now, maybe this is JSON files. Maybe each of these is a worksheet in an Excel spreadsheet. Sure, I can create models off of that, but that's not going to have these relationships defined. I can manually say, here's my relationship. I've also got a cute button over here that says derive relationships. It'll go through based on table names, based on column names, based on data types. It'll make its best guess on suggestions for primary keys and foreign keys. Maybe it's right. Maybe it's 80% right. But even if it's 80% right, that's 80% of the work I don't have to do. So that is discovery, getting the layout of my source systems and understanding the relationships, the hierarchies and relationships between all these entities. The profiling is also really cool. I ran that, and I can look at the results of it here. I can see for this table, for example, all these different statistics on what my source system looks like. And I can look here and I can say that, hey, this region has 66% null values. Why is that? I don't know. I can go talk to whoever owns the system that I got the data from, and maybe they'll say, oh, we just added that 2 months ago, and so region only has a value for the last 2 months. If you go back more than 2 months ago, it's all null. Okay, great. I can add that as a comment on this field, and that'll flow all the way to the end user documentation. So the analysts who are now looking at the data I've got, when they see region, they can look in that glossary and they can see there's a comment on there saying, hey, this is only effective after a certain date. I can add my own custom stats too. So maybe there's particular statuses I'm looking for. Maybe there's particular dates. We had a customer that said, I want to look at orders that have, I want to count the percent where the ship date is more than 10 years in the future, because that makes no sense more whatsoever to have a ship date 10 years in the future or 10 years in the past. And they can get that as a percentage. Now, what do they do with that? They can use that themselves to get a better understanding of their source system. They can add rules that say, hey, when I'm going from my source system to my star schema or whatever data warehouse I'm building, if tell me if more than 5% of the rows have bad data. as I'm migrating from building things from my source system, which is what I've got here, into, let's say, a star schema, I'll just create a new star schema. I'll give it today's date. I'll just display it. It's got some placeholders in here. I don't care about Teradata, so I'll delete that. But let's say I want to create a simple star schema from my SQL Server database. Okay, well, I know I want orders as a fact table. So there's my fact table. I know that I want the order details on there. I want to denormalize it. Okay, so let's go to order details and let's grab all these columns and add them. And I'll just put them under employee ID. And the nice thing is, because I had this all created, I didn't have to tell it how to join order and order details. It's done automatically. WhereScape understands that. Okay, running out of time. Let's say we want to add customers here because customer is on here. I can just drag that and drop it and say, okay, we're going to make a changing dimension out of customers. And that's the business key right there. I want to do product. Let's do product as well. And there is we'll make that just a regular dimension. That's there. I will neaten this up a little bit. And I've got the surrogate keys added to my dimensions, but not to the fact table yet. I can go through a couple steps here. I can say, okay, let's add surrogate keys. There, now they're added to the fact table. So I don't need customer ID on my fact table anymore. And I don't need product ID on my fact table anymore. And I'm essentially done. There's my simple star schema I've got created. I can bundle this up and package it and send it to Red, and Red will build out the load tables, the stage tables, the facts, and the dimensions. And really, everything will be working after that. There's a lot more to this design tool. We're at the top of the hour right now, and I want to be respectful for your time. But if you want to talk about specific use cases, maybe there's something you've been trying to do, you got some particular pain point, you're trying to integrate new systems, you're trying to modernize an old on-prem SQL Server, or maybe you've been tasked with what's it going to take to migrate from SQL Server up into Azure or Fabric. Love to talk to you about it. I hope you understand the power of data warehouse automation, especially WhereScape. The idea that I can create very technical things without understanding the underlying technology. Let me give you one more example. I've got a REST API connection here. I know a lot of you use REST APIs. Here's my connection I created. It's got the URL in here for getting data from the Treasury Department. How do I get that data into Snowflake? Same way, I browse it like I would browse the database. It makes the HTTP request, gets back the JSON file, and then says, hey, here's the data I'm getting back. Does this look okay? That looks fine. Okay, I've got an object in my one type of object in here. Okay, that's what we'll look at. I'll say finish. And now I can look here and say, here are the entities, records in my JSON file. I can just say, let's create a load table from it. I can drag it. I can drop it. I can build my update script, create and load my table up in Snowflake. Same, everything's generated from templates. In this case, the mechanics of what's happening is entirely different because I'm not pulling data from an ODBC connection. I'm pulling data from a JSON file that came back from a REST API. But there it is. There's all my data up in a brand new table up in Snowflake. It all works the first time. Once I've got the data in my load table, I can treat it just like data from a database or any place else. I can merge it in with other stage tables. I can create my own facts and dimensions off of it. Excuse me. And I can add it to my jobs in my scheduler so we can query that HTTP request. Designer, yes. So someone did ask about licensing model. I'm not an account executive. I can give you rough numbers as long as you don't quote me on it. The cost of this always comes out, and the cost depends. How many licenses you're going to buy? It's a subscription per year. You're going to buy 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. How many licenses you buy? We do discounts for higher ed because we understand that higher ed has limited budgets. So I will tell you the list price is something on the order of $25,000 to $30,000 for both tools per person per year. As I said, more tools, more users, more of a discount, and we can typically throw in a pretty good discount for higher ed customers. The other thing that we have is that if you do buy WhereScape and have a license for it, you can use it for free in the classroom. We've got 2 or 3 or 4 universities that are using WhereScape in the classrooms where they're teaching data engineering and data warehouse design. They've got free use of WhereScape for that as well. Some of you may have met Bren from Colorado Christian at HEDW. They use it in the classroom. Jeff Christian at Cornell, they're using it in the classroom. We've done guest lectures for him as well. So we're very happy to work with you. You've got my email address. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Like I said, if you've got specific use cases and want to ask, hey, how would you handle this kind of situation? I'll be glad to set something up. I'm going to be gone next week. I'm actually going to Mexico for a quick vacation. So I probably won't get back to you next week and maybe the week after that. But today is Thursday. One more day until the weekend, and Saturday morning I got on a plane and fly away. I'm looking forward to that. All right. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. I can hang around for a minute just in case you have any questions you want to ask. But enjoy the rest of your day, and I'd appreciate it if you would continue to think about WhereScape and really look and see what it can do for you. Thanks all.
Thank you.